The second question we have today is, if I'm in a real estate transaction or about to get into a real estate transaction, when can I back out? That's a big question. Real estate contracts are the most powerful contracts written that I'm aware of. Once you're bound into one as a buyer or as a seller, if you have a fully executed agreement with earnest money, that agreement is binding. There are terms and conditions in the agreement. There are points in time when the deal could be dissolved without anybody having financial liability to the other party, as long as the terms of the contract are followed. As far as just walking away arbitrarily, the time for that is before you buy the home or before you sell the home. Both parties, the buyer and the seller, have a binding contract once everything is signed, price is agreed to, closing date, all the terms, and earnest money is delivered to the listing broker's office. That money is held by the listing broker's office until closing, and it is credited back to the buyer. Most purchase agreements are set up with an inspection period, a 10-day inspection period that would give a buyer an opportunity to inspect the home, make sure they made a great decision. Typically, they're going to find problems with every home out there, and they would address those issues and possibly negotiate some of the items if they're safety hazard or health hazard type items, such as radon or faulty electrical, that might need to be addressed with a seller. That's all negotiable. Most purchase agreements are subject to financing, meaning we have to get a loan from the bank, although the buyer should be pre-approved before entering into that contract. Subject to appraisal, so the home has to appraise for value. And if it didn't, once again, there are some possibilities to keep the deal going forward. Renegotiation that can happen, but it could be a legitimate out there and a chance for a buyer or a seller to walk away, depending on the circumstances. Every contract is a little bit different, but these are some of the critical points in time. If a buyer or a seller was to walk away from a contract and wasn't following those terms, the inspection, the appraisal, the bank, also there's a clause in there for termite, and certain given dates in the contract, if those are not followed, the buyer could have specific performance grievance against the seller and ask that they are compensated or that they are allowed legally to buy the home. And the opposite is true. If a buyer just changes their mind outside of the terms of the agreement, the seller could ask to retain earnest money. They could also ask for damages, and the damages could be the seller sold to buyer number one here, then later sells to buyer number two for way down here, and there's a loss, there's holding costs, monthly interest. I mean, there's a myriad of different things that a seller could argue that they need to be compensated for as loss if a buyer walked away without cause. So my advice to you on this is, if you're a buyer, you make sure that you've done your research, you're working with a licensed realtor that's a member of an MLS to go out and work for you to make sure that you're viewing enough properties, that you're making a good financial decision, that they're giving you market data, supporting value, and helping guide you through the inspections so that you know that you made a sound decision when you ink that paper. And also, as a seller, if you sell that home for one price and somebody bangs on your door later on that week and wants to buy, you would want to stick with your contract. The contract is binding, and you could take a backup offer. You would also want to have a realtor helping you with this to take backup offers and be positioned to take a backup offer if necessary, but be aware that you are under contract if you are under contract, and that is binding, and that buyer has an interest in that home. And unless it's spelled out differently in your contract, that home is no longer available for another buyer to be put into first position. That buyer needs all the opportunity to follow the contract conditions to the closing table. That is my opinion and advice to you on When can I walk away? If you have any more questions on this issue, feel free to contact me, Aaron Bircher, 712-212-7553, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. Thank you.